Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 14 with Tino and Aaron. What's going on, Aaron?
Too much, doing okay. You
Um,
sound echoey today.
is it bad?
Not too bad. You just got some bass, man. You got a little berry
Oh,
green.
that's called wake up, man. I'm drinking my coffee still. So today we're going to be covering each of our top 10 pitching prospects. I'm going to take a little break from SP and the majors and talk about the young kids. We're going to cover some of the transactions that have happened in baseball over the last week or so that have kind of shaken the foundation of a lot of different teams. And in our home league, we had our keeper declaration day yesterday. So we're going to discuss our reactions around who was kept and who wasn't kept, how much panic set in when you looked at the lists. I know for me, it was a ton, and go from there. Let's get started. You got a coffee story for me?
I don't. Pretty usual around here. I had my Chemex of my decaf this morning. Nice and bright and balanced. It was nice. Haven't been in the shop since last time we talked. I was gonna get or an Italiano and see if anybody knew what it was.
Nice.
But
Nice.
I've just been brewing at home last couple of days, so pretty normal, pretty standard. How about you?
Right on. I was going to ask you, do I lose my coffee card because of something that I did this week? So I was at the roastery and I bought well, the the girl that was helping me says, "Hey, like I know you like, single origin and roasted coffee. We've got this Guatemala over there that's half price." I was like, "Oh, cool." And I went and looked at it, and what's the date? It's March 24th. So the roast date was late February. And I know good and well what happens to coffee when it's been sitting for that long.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's the cheap in me or if it's the being away from coffee for as long as I have, but I went ahead and bought it. And so now I have a really cheap bag of Guatemala that's in line to be brewed next. And all I can think about now is the fact that I knew better and I shouldn't have bought it. So do I still get my coffee card?
Yeah, everyone gets to swing and a miss once in a while.
We'll see how it is. Actually, it'll be a bit of an experiment to see what it tastes like, because I've always been fascinated with how coffee oxidizes and ages over time, and when you
Yeah.
consume it, how much is there a point uh, in that digression where coffee starts to actually taste interestingly good, or
Hmm.
does it just get worse and worse and worse? I don't really know, but this will be
Yeah.
fun. So that's my coffee
Maybe
story.
maybe you can brew it in a way to bring out what life has left.
Right. We'll see how it goes. Do a little cupping of some old ass coffee. All right, let's move to some of the interesting transactions that have occurred over the last week. We will start with what I think might start to be your new favorite team, the Milwaukee Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers signed Andrew McCutchen to a 1-year deal. First question is, how much interest do you have in McCutchen fantasy-wise this year, given that he's going to the Brewers, and who does this impact, in your opinion?
I think to me it tightens the already tight DH at bats on that team. I mean, he can certainly play some outfield, but it sounded like from what the GM said, they envisioned him as the primary DH. And I certainly saw Tellez getting a fair amount of DH at bats, and I also had hoped Keston here might get DH at bats. And now they have 5 outfielders, including McCutchen, who between Taylor and Kane
Mhm.
and Yelich, and I'm forgetting someone else, Renfro. Now, so I mean, it's 5 outfielders. So yeah, it's just getting really crowded there really fast. They were a team that needed more hits, more offense last year,
Mhm.
but he was a great fit for their team. But yeah, fantasy wise, it's getting to be a bit of a crunch, and it makes me reticent, honestly, to invest too heavily in any of them.
Right.
But if I really thought he was going to get 450 to 500 bats in Milwaukee, I think I'd be pretty interested in him as an outfield DH option, as a 4th outfielder type, especially if I didn't need speed. Like if I was looking for power and RBIs, I mean, do you think he's a zero? I don't think he's a zero at speed, do you, at this point? But he's certainly not an asset.
McCutcheon? No, I
Yeah.
think McCutcheon is, well, first of all, we talked about roster construction a ton. And if you can get even 5 steals, 5, 10 steals from a guy, that's a huge positive. And I think we think of McCutcheon as being slow now because he did add so much speed in the past, but I don't think he's a zero. I'm actually going to look up real quickly how many bases he's stolen in the last couple of years. I like the deal a lot for the
Yeah, me too.
for the Brewers. I think that it was really smart, and McCutcheon has something to lend. He's also a really, as we know, a really great clubhouse guy. And I think I don't know that the Brewers needed that necessarily, but he's not a bad guy to have around. Let's see here. Let me bring this up. I've got a dog running around the background behind me too. So last year in 144 games, he stole 6 bags.
Okay.
And most projections have him for about 6 steals. This upcoming year, the last year he had double-digit steals was 2018. So, like we said, he's going to add 5, 6 steals. His projections are also have him in the 230, 240 range. So he will be in average leagues. He will be a bit of a drag. Fortunately for us, we count hits, and so the fact that he's due to get a bunch of plate appearances, I think he won't hurt us in that category all that much. Projections also have him in the low 20s for home runs, so I think he's a decent outfield 3, maybe outfield 4, sort like backup sort of outfield option. But not a horrible one, and we could probably get him for a much better price than you would somebody else just because he's old. The player that it impacts in my mind the most is probably Keston Hiura, because Hiura was set to get a lot of at-bats against left-handers, and they probably would have given him those at-bats whether he was performing up to Keston Hiura standards or not, to try to get him on track, at least, give him a month or two to try to figure it out. And at this point now, I think those at-bats kind of go away. And then Tyrone Taylor obviously is going to be impacted as well as a right-handed outfielder. So if they're all performing well, I see them all getting somewhere between 300 and 450 at-bats, which for the Brewers is a great thing, and for fantasy is probably not so great.
Yeah, that's my primary concern. It's not what he has left in his talent. It's what's the playing time going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interested in some of the other pieces that our offense, and that kind of pushes everyone down a little bit.
Right. For me too. And unfortunately, I actually like a lot of those players. I like Hiura. I'm rooting for him. He was my second base kind of dynasty player for a couple of years there, and I was really hopeful that he was going to be a 30 home run second baseman. Taylor's an interesting one because I think he has some double-digit steal, double-digit power potential if he gets enough at-bats. Kane is on the backside of his career, and Tellez, I think if Tellez hits, because he's left-handed, if Tellez hits, he's going to play, right? At least as a strong side platoon guy. And so I don't know that McCutcheon impacts Tellez as much as he does the others.
Right. I just think it puts pressure on his bat that he has to hit. They have other options.
Yes, absolutely. So next one we have on the list is Anthony Rizzo signing a 1-year deal with the Yankees. First, do you think that he expected to get a larger deal elsewhere or a longer term deal and decided to go back to the Yankees? Or was this his plan all along? We know that the Yankees were aiming for both Freeman and Matt Olson, so they settled on Rizzo.
I don't know. I saw this kind of on theme with their offseason, and they've been a little bit more defensive minded. He's a plus defender at first base. They also really needed a left-handed at bat. And you mentioned they were after a couple other premium first basemen who were left-handed. They're a very right-handed team. I mean, I don't know what he expected. He's a gritty ball player. I've always thought he played a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, so maybe he likes being in New York. Probably suits him a little bit. To me, the more interesting aspect of him going to New York was the Voit trade. Mm-hmm. I think that's the one for fantasy that kind of interests me more. And I'm glad that they moved on from him and gave him a new opportunity, because that's the one that interests me more from fantasy. Rizzo's kind of a plug, depth option for me at this point.
What do you see from Voigt? You're looking at a eight. You think he has an 850 OPS in San Diego, even with 450, 500 at bats?
I think per plate appearance, he could be a top 10 first baseman, based on his power and barrel, his ability to barrel the ball. I mean, he's just kind of a masher, and
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have a ton of chase or swing and miss in this game either.
Mm-hmm.
He's not elite bat to ball, but I just, if you need power, I mean, he went immediately to hitting cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
And I know once Tatis comes back, everyone's going to move down, but um, they certainly seem pretty committed to him, giving him full-time DH at bats. And with the
Right.
challenges he's had staying on the field and his defensive limitations, that just seems like a really good landing spot. And San Diego is harder on left-handed power than it is right-handed power. So
Right.
I don't know. He's just, first base, looking at our pool for our league, is pretty deep. I don't think you have to get anyone, but to me, he's just about as intriguing as anybody in the
Mhm.
first base pool right now.
So I have this. This is a little bit not a hot take, but this is a little bit of a fun one. I think. How much different is Rizzo in New York than Kyle Schwarber in Philadelphia? And the reason I
Mm,
ask is they're both high OBP guys. They both are slated to hit leadoff currently for
yeah.
each of their teams. So high OBP, very little speed up top. And Rizzo, actually, I looked it up. So he hit 22 home runs last year. And if all of his batted balls were at Yankee Stadium, he would have hit 32.
Oh man.
And so that doesn't account obviously for, Tampa Bay and some of the parks in the NL or AL East, but you'd still have, Toronto and Baltimore, which are good hitters parks as well. So not to say that I think Rizzo's going to hit 30 home runs next year, and he'll probably hit 10 less home runs than Schwarber. At least I'm hoping so, given the fact we've rostered him. But I do think he's a good play under the radar, especially if he's hitting at the top of that lineup, because he's probably going to be encouraged to take walks even more so. And although we're not rewarded for OBP, it'll hit his OPS, and obviously he's got some big bats behind him to drive him in. So I think he's a sneaky 100-run candidate,
Mm,
and it would not surprise me to see him also hit 25 home runs.
mm.
So I'm actually, as much as I personally do not like, I've never liked Rizzo as a player. I thought he was, to your point, he has a little bit of an edge, and which is fine. I actually usually love that, but he's always rubbed me the wrong way. But I'm not going to be afraid to take him in any kind of redraft, because I do think
Yeah,
the points are there.
I think I've possibly missed a little bit on his, but like his bat to ball metrics. If I did not think he had that kind of power left in his bat, even in a favorable left-handed park. So I'll have to redouble down on my homework there. And I just also haven't gotten a feel for what they're doing with their lineup. So I've
I
been
don't think they do
following
either.
Mike Curlin's, lineup tracker, which is an amazing tool
Mm-hmm.
in spring training. And their lineups have been very different. Their starters haven't been together. And it almost, if you look at what they're doing so far, it almost makes it look like DJ LeMahieu is a backup,
Right.
which I can't believe that's true. Um, and they have Stanton, who needs DH at bats, and so between he and LeMahieu at first, if it's LeMahieu and Rizzo in a platoon, and then LeMahieu plays somewhere else, when yeah, it's just not clear to me how it's all going to shake out and who is going to be the lead off, because I would presume DJ would be leading off when he plays. But to
I
your
think
point, that high OBP uh, top of that lineup, whether or not you and I like the Yankees, there's a fantasy potential there without a doubt.
mhm. I think we'll see LeMahieu play some second base, and especially if Torres struggles at all, which we've seen over the last couple of years. They're going to get LeMahieu at bats, but he's going to be playing all around the diamond. Uh, yeah, they're interesting. They remind me of the old original Colorado Rockies sluggers, teams or with like Greg Vaughn and Vinny Castilla and then the very old Detroit Tigers when they had Cecil Fielder and Rob Deere and all those guys who were hitting like 220 and they're all home run hitters. The Yankees have a little bit of that vibe, right? At this point with all the sluggers. But they're all like 90, hard hit, 90th percentile hard hit guys, barrel guys. They're not gonna play any defense either. They're gonna try to outslug everybody. So we'll see what happens.
That's why I was interested. I mean, bringing in IKF and then Rizzo. I mean, they're very different types of hitters. They bring a different approach, and how obviously that's not going to change the form or the nature of those big hitters, but just bringing some lineup variety. It just seems like maybe there's some thought to bring some a different mentality and valuing defense up the middle, getting Torres off of short, and IKF's a plus defender, even if he only plays half the time. Something like that, it could really impact their defense in a positive way.
And with
And then
Donaldson's plus at third, right? So with Donaldson and IKF, they've got a dynamite left side of the infield.
And both their catchers are now defensive first catchers. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think they're a work in progress. And then as Volpe comes up, which will probably, I'm guessing will happen, early 2023. If you got Volpe at short and they move IKF to second, you got a pretty good up the middle defense, at least an athletic one, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next transaction we're going to discuss is Alex Colomé going to the Colorado Rockies. I have to admit that, I rostered him in our 16-team head-to-head last year, and I have to admit there was a split second when he signed with the Rockies where I actually did consider keeping him just because for cheap saves. But his stats under the hood, it's pretty ugly. He had a 64% left on base percentage last year, which is very low. What that means is he probably got a bit unlucky and was a bit not clutch when with runners on, and so your ERA tends to go up a bit when you have that lower left on base percentage. Standard or average is right around 75. It'll fluctuate year to year, but he's an example of someone who let a lot of runners score. The example on the other end of the spectrum is Robbie Ray, who had a 90% left on base percentage last year. It also gets impacted by pitchers who give up a lot of ground balls will tend to have a bit of a lower percentage as well, because they typically give up a higher average or more hits. And then strikeout pitchers will have a better left on base percentage because they're able to get out of jams with strikeouts. Anyways, he also had his K minus BB last year was 12.1. We talk about that 20% threshold with K minus BB, and 12.1 is not good, especially for a reliever. His cutter was good. His cutter, he surrendered a 230 average. The XBA in the cutter was 222, but he surrendered 371 average on his fastball and a 358 XBA with an X slug of 624. So his fastball is also really straight. So it had a 64% less movement than the average fastball horizontally, which means that if you see the fastball coming, it's coming pretty darn straight, right? And it has very little, or it doesn't have more than average vertical movement. So his fastball is just a meatball essentially. And then his cutter and his fastball were both +3 run value last year. So both slightly below average pitches. So he's one who you just have to watch and make sure that he has the role. To me, this is like the prototypical Colorado Rockies signing. They're signing a player who used to be good, who has a bit of a name, and they're handing him a role because of that name and not because of the skills. Fortunately for him, he's competing with Carlos Estevez and Daniel Bard and those types of pitchers for saves. So there's a very good chance that if there are save opportunities in Colorado, he'll get them. Would you select someone like Colomé if you really needed saves?
I'm going to say no, and I can stand on my laurels because you offered him to me several times last year, and I needed saves and I refused to do it. And honestly, I don't say that with any sort of pride because it came at my own detriment.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know that I don't know that I could. that's my fantasy take, is don't put yourself in a position where you have to take Alex Colomé.
Right.
And if
Which
you are
is
in that position, then you did a good job outlining what you can expect.
right. Well, that's the position that, we talked about in the last episode that I put myself in year after year, is going and searching for pitching and getting stuck taking an Alex Colomé in after keeping 15, taking Alex Colomé in the second or third round because I needed saves. And he would screw up the ratios and then he'd lose his job. And all of a sudden your second round pick was burnt on, someone who's going to get shelled in Colorado. That's the other thing, is with that kind of profile, with this really straight fastball that's a meatball and an okay cutter, you're going to Colorado to close. His ERA is going to be bad. The next one on the list is Jock Peterson going to the Giants. So first of all, how do you feel if you're a Dodgers fan, right, with Peterson going to the Giants? And second of all, in your opinion, how does that impact anything? And do you like that signing?
It fits what they do. It's on brand for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly like them since we roster several of their players. But I like to, I'm trying to think positively that now there's a DH. So there's, more at bats to go around. And those players that we rostered still will have the same opportunity. So, but yeah, it's, he's a strict platoon bat and power from the left side. And that very much, there was no team that exemplified or really succeeded with platoons as much as they did. So again, it's on brand for them. Fantasy wise, someone who's in a strict platoon, I don't think you can really, for me, I wouldn't rely on it.
He might be, if he plays well, I would see maybe rostering him as a backup outfielder, like your one backup outfielder in our 16 team league, and then playing those platoons. So if he's going against a right-handed pitcher, especially in a park that surrenders home runs, he's not a bad bet, to play as your third outfielder sometimes. Or if you have someone else has a rough matchup, being able to slide him in. He's a good kind of cheap power source, I think. Interestingly, with the Giants, when I was looking at their roster resource with the Giants, they got a lot of left-handed hitters. And I wonder how, everything they do is with intentionality. And so I wonder what it is. I haven't looked at the breakdown of their division, left and right starting pitching, but you've got Lamont Wade Jr. Playing in the outfield. You've got Mike Yastrzemski playing in the outfield. Now you've got Jock Peterson and Steven Duggar as well. And all four of those guys are left-handed hitters, right? And then on the bench, outfielders, potential outfielders would be Darren Ruff, Austin Slater, and then Mauricio Dubon can play a little bit outfield as well. I think Peterson slides in as the full-time DH on this team. And he's good for 25 home runs in that role. Interestingly, his 80th percentile exit velocity and 84th percentile hard hit last year, but he had his XBA was 33rd percentile and his X slug was 58th. So he's a low average, good power guy, lots of swing and miss, lots of strikeouts. But in a pinch, he's a fourth outfielder in the same way that Alex Colomé is a second closer. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Next, we have Seiya Suzuki, who signed a 5-year contract with the Chicago Cubs. I think we're both pretty excited about him. Quick question for you, based on what you saw in our league. Where do you think he goes?
The rumors, I have a very poor sense of what our competitors like to do or what they do, but the things I have heard, from people I trust are that he's going to go really quickly.
On one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like within the first few picks even.
Got it.
I know I talked to someone who's in the top 5 who was hoping that he would make it to them. And so, and then, we talked to Matt last night and he intimated as well that he thinks the interest is going to be high. And he's played with this group of players a lot longer than I have. So
right.
I give what he says a lot of credence, but I honestly thought, I'm not comparing the two because I know the KBO is not the Nippon League and the players are not the same, but I thought I really wanted Hansal Kim last year and I thought he would go a lot sooner than he did. And I was shocked I had a chance to get him in the third.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1, but I do question a little bit. Will our league mates value someone coming over, or is it just a completely different case and there's no connection, that the connection I'm making there eventually I'm falling past the first round if there's nothing to that.
Yeah,
So
I think there's a lot of, I played in this with most of these guys for what, I think 12 years now, something like that. And I think I would say that there's a lot more hype around Suzuki than there was around Kim.
mhm,
Kim had potentially more value than Suzuki because of the position that he played. But
mhm.
because there was a lot of buildup for Suzuki, and because he's going to Chicago, I think that there's a bit more attention and hype from our league mates around him. What do you see as, we talked about Suzuki a bit? What do you think he does this year? What's his upside?
I mean, I would anticipate he'd get off to a slow start. I mean, I think his ceiling, based on his track record, especially once the weather warms up and he acclimates, is to get in the upper 20s of homers and potentially still 10 to 12 bags. I didn't really roster any Cubs last year, and so I don't really know Ross and their approach to steals. I know because a lot of steals comes down to team philosophy.
Mhm.
So I just don't have a good feel of how many green lights he'll have, but you would think he has the ability to um, still 8 to 10 based on his skill if they let him run. So, and then he's going to bat based on the talent they currently have and the way they're constructed. I would just say he's going to bat in the middle of the lineup. So, um, really good, opportunity for counting stats. And I think, yeah, upper 20s power with some speed, I think would be a great outcome for his sort of transitional year transitioning to the MLB. That's probably, again, that's the ceiling. That would be my ceiling expectation for his first year.
Right. One of the sneaky parts about Suzuki is there's potential to be he's a plus hit tool, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
potential for him to be a decent average hitter and maybe even help you in the average or hits category. Uh, Projections are all over the board. Steamer is aggressive with him, and they see 29 home runs and in the 80s with runs and RBIs, and then 9 steals, and actually hitting 286 with an OPS just over 900. And then ATC sees more of a low 20s home runs, mid 60s runs and RBIs, 7 steals, and a 260 hitter. And then Bad X is the least aggressive, 19 home runs, 64 runs, 61 RBIs, hitting 251. So obviously we don't have a real good way to project what he's going to do, but I think all the projections are in agreement that he's going to probably get just above 20 home runs and just under 10 steals. And where he hits in that lineup and what that lineup looks like is going to, I think, have a lot to do with whether Suzuki is a valuable outfielder in fantasy or not.
Yeah.
It does impact a bit their outfield with Clint Frazier and Rafael Ortega, I think, are the two that will be impacted the most. They're going to need a center fielder, and the two that are able to play center field in their outfield are Jason Hayward and Ortega. So I think their jobs in center are pretty safe. Neither of whom I'd want to roster, certainly not Hayward. But if we thought Clint Frazier had the possibility of finally getting 550 plate appearances and seeing what he can do, I don't think that's happening this year either with Suzuki there. Would you take him in the top 5 if you had that pick?
The
Based
way
on
my team, the way my personal team is constructed right now, yes, I would.
Mm-hmm.
If I had kept more outfielders, probably not.
Mm-hmm. So
But
the decision for me was, I kept Acuna and Julio. And as Julio was looking better, better than we thought in those first couple of games, I think there is a real possibility that he starts the season with the big league team. And I still need another outfielder, but I ended up trading the 4th pick for Carlos Rodon. And the choice for me was essentially Rodon or Suzuki. And they both come with question marks, but I ended up taking the pitcher in this situation. We'll see whether that comes to fruition or not.
Yeah.
The next play, do you have anything else on Suzuki?
I don't necessarily. I was just looking at our league. There are 64 outfield eligible players that were kept.
Mm-hmm.
And so 16 teams, 3 outfield. So we're already at a surplus of outfielders. And again, that's multi-eligibility as well.
And
We have a
minor
util
leaguers.
spot. So and honestly, I look at the outfield pool. I think it's one of the deeper pools that we have to choose from. So
Mhm.
it was one of the reasons. I don't want to jump too far ahead on the timeline, but it was one of the reasons I was comfortable not keeping outfield, because I felt, and my read turned out to be right, there'd be a lot of talent available.
Right.
But yeah, I think Suzuki would definitely be one of the better options. But if you were in that spot at 1-4, say, and you were looking for outfield and you didn't make it to you, I don't think you would be hung out to dry by any means.
Right. I also would, I think that name recognition and who's hot in the moment has so much to do with where people end up picking. Like
For
if I'm to
sure.
compare, say, a Suzuki, and understanding that there's, a lot of variability in what we can predict. If I compare him to Tommy Pham, who I did keep as my last keeper, right? Pham has the same power in
Right.
Cincinnati where he signed, potentially more power. He's proven to provide more speed. And that offense is going to score runs, whether they're good or not, because of the park that they play in.
No, they
And
better. I'm in trouble.
and so, right. So if Tommy Pham, Tommy Pham is probably I'm gonna take a hit in hits because he's not his hit tool is not great, but all the other stats I think are going to be really comparable. And he was just a guy that I picked up because someone else was cutting him, and I gave him a 3-round draft pick upgrade, I think, for Tommy Pham. So I'm not trying to say I made the right move. It's just I don't know that we're always looking at the numbers to really determine value. Suzuki has tons of helium because he's Seiya Suzuki.
Yeah.
I would not pick him after looking at, digging and digging and digging. I would not take him in the first round if it was me. I think there are other positions that are much more, from a scarcity perspective, are much more important.
I agree.
The next transaction is Chris Bryant. Everybody was shocked to see Chris Bryant sign with the Colorado Rockies for the next 6 years. This was
I
definitely,
wasn't.
you weren't? To me,
No.
this was I'm going to set my family up. I'm going to be close to Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
which I call home. I'm going to live a
Mm-hmm.
really nice life because Denver is
Yep.
amazing, and I'm going to
Chill.
go
Yep.
pad my numbers a bit in Colorado, drink
Yep.
some good beer, and
Yep.
see if I can't hit 35 home runs a year.
I couldn't agree more. It seems very much him. It's off the beaten path. I don't think he likes the pressure or the limelight. I think he just wants to chill and be
Mhm.
Chris Bryant.
I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd go that far. I think he was. Um, I think he's a little bit more focused and a little bit more of a competitor than that. I know that he was interested in going back to San Francisco and that he really enjoyed his time there. I don't think that they were in the business of offering him a 6-year contract. And I know when he was in Chicago, like I don't think he shied away from the attention as much as I think the expectations of him after his first couple of years were so high, and that had an impact on him for sure. But yeah, there's some truth to that, right? When you sign with Colorado, of all teams, you're going there to hit some home runs, or maybe not hit home runs, maybe hit 320, and like I said, drink some good beer. Well, they're interesting, right? Like Colorado, the they don't surrender a ton of home runs. Coors doesn't. It's just a place to hit gappers and base hits over and over again. Is he someone you'd be interested in? He's also he may lose his third base eligibility too. So they signed Brian McMahon to a longer term deal, and it looks like McMahon may settle in at third base, and so Bryant may just become outfield eligible moving forward.
I mean, you can't really trust what they say, but that's what they said, that he's
Right.
going to play the outfield.
Right.
So, and he will that Garrett Cole for Chris Bryant trade over for will be on my mantle is this is how this league values pitching. It took Chris Bryant to get Garrett Cole.
Right. Well, we also saw, not to throw anybody under the bus, but we also saw Dallas Keuchel get kept instead of Lance Lynn. So, I don't know that the trades are always people are always digging enough. Chris Bryant had a lot of cachet, he still does, and of course Garrett Cole ends up going to Aaron Horn, but that's another story.
It's not about the ownership or the decisions. It's more, I don't think that much of Chris Bryant, and the fact that he returned Garrett Cole is just kind of amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. I like him.
I know you like Bryant more. We've had that discussion, and that's
I do.
okay.
I think he's an on-base machine. He takes a ton of walks, and he's got a plus hit tool and less power than I think less power than his reputation, but still enough power to hit 25, 30 home runs. Just real quickly, I think this hurts Connor Joe. Connor Joe's a first base outfield hitter basically for Colorado, and someone I was actually excited to look at in the mid to late rounds in our draft. And I think this hurts him from a plate appearance standpoint. It also hurts Jonathan Daza a little bit too, just because he was an outfielder that stood to get some plate appearances. And then Garrett Hampson, who is kind of a plug and play at a bunch of positions and a double-digit homer, double-digit steal guy. He'll still get 400 plate appearances, but without Bryant there, he may have gotten 500. Freddie Freeman signs with the Dodgers. So huge drama. Freeman wants 6 years. Braves wanted to give him 5. Freeman's from California. We talked about this a little bit. The minute the Braves realized that they weren't going to be able to sign Freeman to 5 years, they pivoted and traded for Matt Olson. Freeman arrives with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are already a little bit difficult to figure out as far as plate appearances and where players are going to play. Only the Dodgers know. What was your reaction to Freeman going to the Dodgers? What does this do for his value? And then obviously, how does that, what's the domino effect fantasy wise with the rest of the Dodgers hitters?
I was surprised he got 6 years, and we talked about when we had our discussion about where these guys might land. I think you had him going to LA. I had other California teams higher because I thought the Dodgers would be reticent to give him that long-term commitment. Ultimately, they did. So I was surprised. Not that they wanted him. I knew that he was from California, and that's why we both thought he might end up in there, or that was likely he would end up there. But I was surprised he got 6 years from them. But to Friedman's credit, when he had a chance to acquire a generational player with Mookie, he gave him a long-term contract, and he's doing the same thing with Freddie. I think for his fantasy, it's going to make the back end of his career more productive, just because he's going to be his counting stats and stuff will continue to be there as his skills start to deteriorate as he gets older. But with his swing and his game, I would expect him to age very gracefully because he doesn't chase. He's not relying on necessarily quick twitch or anything like that. He's just got great bat to ball and great contact and great feel for the zone and what he wants to do. So I think this is going to extend his time as a premier player because he's going to have other premier players in a lineup around him that's going to support his counting stats and his production. I think it hurts Gavin.
On that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other first baseman that off the top of my head who signed longer term deals around this age were Albert Pujols signing with the Angels, Miguel Cabrera signing with the Tigers, and Joey Votto signing with the Reds. And as we know, Votto is the only one out of those three that is coming close to performing to the value of that contract, right?
Sure.
And the way in which you described Freeman, as far as being a good bat to ball skill, not relying upon quick twitch, very coordinated sort of hitter, I would think of Pujols and Cabrera in the same way, right? Cabrera is a technician with the bat and was never really a slugger. He's more of a hitter. And Votto, obviously, we know all about Votto trying to take walks and base hits, and then he changed his approach. But I would be reticent to give a 6-year contract to a 32-year-old first baseman. I imagine what the Dodgers are thinking is more, let's get him here for the next 2 or 3 years, even if it takes a 6-year contract to do it. And then if we don't want him anymore, we have the money to trade him and take on, other salary, right? We have that high ceiling sort of payroll. And so I don't know that they even imagine him being on the team for those last 3 years, as much as let's figure it out later because we have the financial might to do it.
Hmm.
At least that's how I would think of it if I was running the Dodgers. I also don't know if he's a generational player. I think he's a good hitter, and he's another one whose reputation is, I think, a bit higher than the actual production. I know he's a kind of a 300, 390, 300, 390, 475, 500 slug sort of first baseman. And he plays good defense, but if he wasn't the team leader that he was in Atlanta and they didn't win a World Series, would we think of Freddie Freeman the same way?
Probably not. I think the way he carries himself and the way he performs, I think does enhance his reputation without a doubt.
Right. So I'm very interested to see how he plays there. I don't know that I have an opinion either way about the signing, as much as I'm fascinated to see how it turns out. Fantasy wise, I think we can expect him to be the same hitter that he's always been. 30 home runs in that lineup, probably 100 runs, 95 to 100 runs and 95 to 100 RBIs. But it impacts a lot of other players, right? And a lot of other players that we both are either interested in or really love.
Yep.
Where does this put Chris? Well, we'll start with, where does it put Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux, and Max Muncy? Because I think those are the three that are most impacted.
I mean, I think it affects all three of them with Lux, then Taylor, and then Muncy probably is the least impacted. I think it gives them an opportunity to load manage Justin Turner. Yeah, I just think unless your name is Mookie or Freddie or Trey, I don't think you're gonna see more than 500 at bats.
Bellinger.
And well, that's where you and I disagree. I don't think he's immune from that either.
To me, the odd man out is Gavin Lux. But if Lux starts this year, on fire, then I think anything can happen, right? Because they're going to support Gavin Lux as a cost-controlled young player with a ton of talent who can play in the middle of the infield. They're going to want him to be the one that succeeds. They'll find the at-bats for Muncy somewhere, whether it's, first or second or third, even third or DH. I think Taylor's the one who potentially loses out the most, even though they signed him to a deal, because Taylor's ceiling is not the same as Muncy or Lux. And the Dodgers, to me, are looking for that ceiling. And so Taylor, so let's say that Muncy's healthy and Lux becomes the player that we thought he could be. I think Chris Taylor goes down to probably 425 plate appearances, maybe 400 even, assuming Justin Turner's also healthy. So it's, again, I love all of those players. Well, I love Lux and Muncy. I have no idea what's going to happen, and it makes me very, very gun shy to roster any of them other than Max Muncy. We'll see what happens. We happen to have some shares of all of them everywhere.
Yeah, it's I think Muncy is has the most buffer. He just exudes that team's approach at the plate and what they do in terms of grinding out at bats and taking walks and hitting for power. And with the DH, I would think he's going to DH most days he's not in the field. I know they're working him at third, which I was surprised to see, given his elbow injury, but it is his non-throwing arm. But I was still surprised to see him all the way across the diamond. But again, I think that puts Turner's plate appearances. You got to question how many he's going to get. Yeah, I just think they're going to rotate everyone around. And I even heard someone who I trust, and it's not, I'm not talking about lead me, it's like a scout saga. They said that the Dodgers are now, they've kind of already internally moved on from Lux, and that Vargas is now the person that they think the most of, which I was surprised to hear. I mean,
But they play different positions, right? Vargas is a corner guy, a corner infield guy, and Lux is a middle infield.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
The only way
I
you move
I
on from a
I thought
talent like
that as
Lux,
well. I thought he was a corner guy as well, and then someone said no, Vargas can play second. But Muncy is on the record saying that he prefers to play second,
mhm.
um, and he's not going anywhere. Um, so I don't know.
I'd say
It's
Vargas's bat is going to play somewhere,
yeah,
and if Lux hits, he's going to play somewhere too. I think he's another one who had such high, the general public had such high expectations for him, and he didn't meet those expectations. But he's not a bad player, especially fantasy wise, right now. And if like we talked about in previous episodes, if he learns to elevate the ball at all, he's going to be a outstanding middle infielder. The Dodgers don't cast away players that quickly. They believe they can tinker and fix guys, right? And they do it all the time. So they're not giving up on, in my opinion, they're not giving up on Bellinger. They're not giving up on Lux. You know, they might sit if they're in a pennant race and those guys aren't producing, but they're not giving up on them, especially not considering the cost control. They have to have players on that roster that they can pay a low wage to because they carry so much salary.
Hmm.
One other thing to add on the Dodgers is I did hear some folks talking about signing Kevin Pillar and that impacting plate appearances as well. And I'm here to disagree and say that Kevin Pillar is not taking any plate appearances from any of the guys we just talked about. I'm sorry.
I don't. I would agree with that. It was a minor league deal, so I
And
think that's a
if anything, he's a defensive replacement at the end of the game for Gavin Lux, who was starting in center field, right? Like, or something like that.
yeah. And I was shocked that I'm gonna say shocked, but they signed Hanser Alberto to a major league deal. I didn't understand that either.
It's
Um,
they I'm sure typical Dodgers, they saw something in him that, we either haven't taken the time to identify or are unable to identify. I'm sure their scouting department and analytics are probably 10 years further along than we have access to at this point, especially that organization. Another interesting Dodger signing is Tyler Anderson signed with the Dodgers for 1 year. And we had the pleasure of watching him for a number of starts at the end of the season last year with the Mariners. I loved him. I was really hoping that the Mariners would sign him and bring him back as a fifth starter, because he was pretty sneaky swing guy, but he produced. And I was really surprised to see when I was digging into him a little more that he threw 167 innings last year. Which these days is you're pretty much a workhorse if you throw 167 innings. And under the hood, it wasn't bad. He had a low left on base percentage of 71.3. He didn't walk a ton of batters. He has pretty good command and control. 35% ground ball rate, but he had 11.5% swinging strike, which was a bit higher than I would have expected based on what I saw watching him. And he really limits, so over his career, his super skill is that he really limits hard hit balls and is able to induce soft contact and induce a lot of chase. So again, one of those players that the Dodgers sign, and from a fantasy point of view, I think we all kind of our antenna go up and say, that's a guy to keep an eye on because the Dodgers see something there. He also has three pitches with very balanced results, which is something we don't always see. We talked a lot about pitchers in SP2 that had 2+ pitches but need that third pitch. And Anderson's kind of the opposite, where he has 3 pitches that are pretty okay, but because he has 3, he produces some pretty good results. Would you consider him at all on your team as a 5th or 6th starter?
No, I would not.
No, just because the whip is too high.
I don't think he'll have consist. I think they'll use him in spots. I mean, they'll use him as a swingman, and if he needed innings in 1 week, I could see picking him up. But I wouldn't. I would not keep a roster spot for him
Mhm.
just because I don't think you're going to be able to count on innings. I mean, they signed Haney, they signed him, they signed someone else who's right-handed. I can't remember. Oh, was it Brad Keller? No, it's a former Royal. I can't think of the name. Maybe it was
Mhm.
Duffy. They
He
signed
did sign
him
Duffy,
as
yeah.
well. You know, it's like they're just signing guys on the edges to make sure they have enough innings.
Yeah, I think Anderson's
Um,
contract though was, I think it was 8 million. So I think his
yeah,
contract did not read swing guy. I think his contract read fifth starter
mm,
because you don't give 8 million to Anderson without assuming that you're going to get a bunch of innings from him, right?
yeah,
So he is competing with Mitch White and Tony Gonsolin and some of the others, and we both like Mitch White and his potential. But I think they want to see White and Gonsolin in that bulk inning role, and so again, I don't know that
yeah. I
I'm
mean,
off him, but I think he's interesting.
yeah. To me, it's. I mean, like if Kershaw goes on the IL for one of his IL stints, and then they'll use him. Like he'll start the game and then go three and a half innings, and then one of those right-handed flamethrowers come in and goes 2 innings, and then they hand it over the bullpen. And so he's not going to be in the game long enough to get a win. And you're not going to know he's going to pitch again. I don't know. I have a hard time believing he's like, okay, you're number 5 starter. You start every 5 days. I just don't see them using their because they haven't the last couple of years. It's been their horses up top that get treated that way, but the rest of the rest of their staff is just completely mix and match and just matchups and just trying to maximize everyone's handedness and ability. It's very fluid.
Mhm.
So I would not save a roster. I wouldn't say I wouldn't use him. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't have him say, okay, there's my number 6 starter. I can count on it. You know what I mean? I would not.
So I just looked it up. It was 8 million over 1 year for Anderson,
That's
and
a good
then
deal for him.
I think so too. And then roster resource right now has him penciled in as the fifth starter
Okay.
behind Andrew Heaney. And then in the bullpen, they have Gonsolin and Mitch White, as we said. And then the other guys are more shorter relievers. So you would assume that he'll have that fifth spot to begin with. And then if he falters, someone else will pick him up. But to your point,
Hmm.
I think that he's not necessarily going to even get 5 innings. One other interesting point, and I would die to be a part of the Dodgers front office, but they're going after left-handed pitching. And so it's Bueller up top, but then the next 4 starters are all left-handed. It's
Yeah. And I thought
Kershaw.
about that when you were talking about the Giants.
Mhm.
You know, you said the Giants are very left-handed, and I was thinking about the Dodgers are all left-handed. So if I was the Dodgers or if I was the Giants, why would I be going off these left-handed hitters? My primary competition is very left-handed. So it's interesting.
But Farhan's a smart dude, the GM
No, for sure.
for the Giants. So they all are, trying to outthink one another. And so they're playing chess while we're playing checkers, so to speak. Um, but I do wonder what it is about that. Is it the park? Is it the defense on the left side? Is it, who they're facing? It could be any number of things. It could be research that they find that it's just harder for people to hit left-handed hitters or see the ball, or I don't know. Who knows? But very, very interesting. And it pops when you look at their roster. Indirectly staying with the Dodgers, the next transaction is Kenley Jansen signing with the Braves. Very interesting signing. Again, like Freddie Freeman, you sign a player like Kenley Jansen, and all of a sudden, a whole bunch of Braves relievers that people were counting on for holds and saves change role. What was your thoughts when you saw that Kenley signed with the Braves?
I think like most people, I was completely surprised
Mhm.
just because they had a well-established closer, although he probably wasn't the most skilled pitcher in his own bullpen. He did perform well in the role. I did see him particularly maybe losing his job during the season, but I thought it would be from someone on his own team. I didn't expect them to bring someone in from the outside, certainly not someone of Kinley's stature. I was really surprised. And to Will Smith's credit, it sounded like he was on board with it. And it's just another example of the Braves just being very calculating and very aggressive.
You think it matters to pitchers like Will Smith whether they close or not?
I would think it would matter less to Will Smith because he's gotten paid in the arbitration system. It does matter more because the saves are what they're used to measure their compensation. So Will Smith didn't always close when he was in San Francisco. So I do think that seems, it didn't take me as lacking genuineness when I read that they did go to him and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, how would you feel? So
Right.
but I do think the younger guys, the way that the jacked arbitration system is set up, they only reward saves, and it needs to be adjusted where they're taking into account leverage or WAR or win probability or some other way to measure a reliever's impact, because saves are just a fraction of what they do now.
Right. I wish that they could choose an arbiter who is a baseball guy as opposed to just a random person, because there's so much more, as we know, right? There's so much more to that. And teams have manipulated the arbitration process for relievers for a long, long time. It's one of the major arguments that was first made to create a bullpen by committee, is that you would be able to sign all of your good arms at really reasonable cost, because you could argue that they didn't have any saves, right? If they were actually that good, they would have had more saves. And which sounds silly, coming out of our mouths in 2022, but the fact of the matter is that's actually the way the system works. The Braves bullpen is interesting. So just reading down their list of short guys, not height, we're talking about inches. From the left side, they have AJ Minter, Tyler Matzek, and Will Smith now to mix and match. And those are three really good left-handed arms. And then from the right side, they've got Luke Jackson, Colin McHugh, and Kenley Jensen. So those are six. They really can shut the game down after that, or in the sixth inning on.
Yeah.
They really have the ability to do that. And although Colin McHugh is probably the only one on that list who has the capability of going more than one inning, it's a really, really interesting mix. Currently, Roster Resource has McHugh as the seventh inning setup guy and Will Smith as the eighth inning setup guy. I'd probably put Luke Jackson in for McHugh, and McHugh be more of a bulk inning or a bulk inning sort of reliever. But super interesting bullpen. And like if you play in a holds league like we do, that's a bullpen that I'll be all over in our draft. I like the skill sets of all of those guys.
And Will, I don't know, I assume you saw, but Will Smith was let go.
Will Smith was let go in our keeper. So breaking news, I don't know if you saw it. We had a trade in baseball between the Blue Jays and the Rockies. The Colorado Rockies traded Raimel Tapia to the Blue Jays for Randall Grichuk. I don't know if
interesting.
I would say that going to Colorado is typically an upgrade for a hitter, but Grichuk is already coming from Toronto, and he's got a little bit too much swing and miss for me. Tapia's average probably stands to dip a little bit moving from Colorado to Toronto, because Colorado is such a great place for a higher average hitter. But I don't really have much interest in either of those two, especially if Tapia is not running.
I don't either.
So the next transaction to cover is Michael Pineda going to the Tigers, a 1-year deal. It looks like he's going to be hopefully an innings guy and their number 5 starter. He gets hit pretty hard, but he's got really good control. And so his whip tends to be pretty low. From a fantasy perspective, that's you can count on him not hurting your ratios. But with the 10% swinging strike and getting hit pretty hard, he's not a great starter. I will consider him for my number 6 starter spot, because I like the fit in Detroit as well, because the park is so big and the division isn't very good.
Right.
What say you about Michael Pineda?
I was gonna say that. I mean, in terms of he has home run issues, but if you're gonna be in a park, it can help you on your side. I think Detroit's a good spot to be
Mhm.
in. And if he's a fifth starter, Hinch can get him out of there, first sign of trouble. But he should be able to get through the lineup a couple times every 5 days, and um, maybe once in a while give him 6 or 7. You
Mhm.
never know. So
He's a good
serviceable
hedge for
signing by them.
he's a good hedge for their young pitchers too, right?
Yeah,
So if you've got with Manning and Skubal and Mize, if one of them implodes or needs a little bit more seasoning, like you can Pineda, you can plug in and not tread water a little bit, I guess. I like him. I still go back to uh, when Pineda came up with the Mariners. He's this big hulking 6'8" dude that was, I think he was 6'8", 260 when he came up, and you dreamt of Pineda and Felix Hernandez together as your like 1-2, and it was fun to watch because his stuff was great, and he was this intimidating presence on the mound. And then we traded him to the Yankees for Jesus Montero, and obviously we know how that ended up. But Pineda is so interesting now because he's much more of a control artist with a pretty decent slider now, whereas before he was throwing gas and he was a lot more raw. But I like I said, I'll consider him. I think any pitcher in Detroit with a little bit of control is a pretty good fit.
cool.
Next signing is Jonathan VR, signed a 1-year deal with the Cubs. Looks like he might be their starting third baseman, and VR with 500 at bats can be very much be a fantasy asset. What do you think about the VR signing?
I mean, I guess it makes sense for them. Just another option on their infield. I think it does mean good things for their young infielders, Madrigal and Horner, who kind of vision them being up the middle. But I know Bodie is hurt, and Hap's no longer on the dirt, so it just gives them another infield option. And they seem to be trying to stay competitive in that Central Division, and we know when he plays, he's going to be productive. So not exciting, but I think again, kind of where the Cubs are, they're looking for serviceable guys that can play and have some skill, and he certainly seems to fit that bill. He finds a new team every year.
He's also a good hedge for Patrick Wisdom and Frank Schwindel, because both of those players were not, didn't quite have the pedigree to perform at the level that they did. And so VR gives you a known commodity that you can plug in. I do think he's their starting third baseman. I think the odd man out is actually Nico Horner, and he'll be more of a super utility guy who still may get 400 at bats. But it looks like from what I read with the Cubs, Madrigal will still be their volume second baseman. They want him to
Yeah,
get 550 plate appearances. They believe in his bat. So I don't know that he's impacted by VR, but Horner and Wisdom certainly are. I would consider VR as a safe but dirty option at third base. If you're looking for a third baseman and you're looking for cheap steals and power, he does have 20 home run, not potential. He's been hitting 20 home runs a year. His speed is really fallen off. And so he's not I think he had 62 steals 1 year. He's not that player anymore. You
yeah,
might
with Baltimore.
closer to 12 steals with him, 10 to 12 steals, I think. But that's still nothing to sneeze at third base, especially at third base. So he's one to look for in those middle to lower rounds. Next signings we'll take as a pairing. Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos both signed 4 and 5 year contracts respectively with the Philadelphia Phillies. This was huge news. I think people expected the Phillies to sign one of those two. And when they signed both, everyone was just kind of, holy shit, what are we doing with this Phillies offense now, sort of thing. I like them both. I think the park is great. What was your reaction to those signings?
Yeah, like you, I didn't expect that second signing after we talked about Schwarber, I think, last week on the pod. But yeah, Castellanos came along after, and I was surprised to see him land there as well, and give him that 5 year deal. Um, and yeah, that's defensively, it's not a great outfield. It's also not a great left side of the infield. So they're going to try to outscore people, and it certainly seems like they're going to be able to do that um, on any given day. So yeah, it's quite the top half of the lineup for sure. I think it falls off at the bottom, but the top 2/3 is going to be quite something to see.
Had a goofy baseball nerd thought yesterday when I was going through the StatCast from the spring training games, because Alec Boehm was 1 for 3, and all 3 of his hits were ground balls. And we've talked incessantly about Alec Boehm hitting the ball into the ground and trying to fix that, and it's over and over again for him. So what happens if Alec Boehm is terrible again, and Philadelphia is trying to figure out what to do? Do you think there's a 5% chance that they try to put Castellanos back at third base again, as he was when he first came up? Because think about it, if they're already horrible defensively, and you can get another bat into the outfield because Castellanos becomes your third baseman, wouldn't you at least have to consider it?
Yeah, I mean, they already have their break glass option with Camargo. They signed him early on, and I think he's their really sad buffer net for. It is bad.
But compare Camargo to being able to plug in another corner outfield hitter, right?
Right.
I don't know. It was just a thought I had when I was looking at it.
Yeah, I mean,
Again,
I
it
don't
was
know.
a goofy baseball nerd thought going back, 8-10 years in Castellanos's career and saying what if, but
yeah, I mean, you could do it in OTP and just take the hit, but I don't know if it's going to happen in real life.
right. And then it looks like at least roster resource has Schwarber hitting leadoff and Castellanos hitting second. What do you see from them with regards to like end of year statistics?
I was a little bit disappointed that Schwarber was leading off. I would like to see him more in the middle of the lineup, selfishly, for the RBIs. But he also is not shy about leading off the game with a home run either. So, but I think Castellanos, I mean, I think he'll match what he did in Cincinnati. I don't see why he couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have plenty of traffic ahead of him, and then you got Harper at third, and then are they going Hoskins and then Realmuto 5?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be those guys will all be driving each other in.
I think the Schwarber trade-off is just runs for RBIs, right? So hitting leadoff, right, he could score 110 runs in that offense. And that's also very valuable. It's just maybe not what the thought was when selecting him in the draft.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like runs are easier to find, but yeah, to your point, they're both valuable. So.
Mm-hmm. And most projections have, I think Schwarber with 10 less runs and RBIs than Castellanos. Schwarber will sit against some lefties sometimes. And then Schwarber has a much better hit tool. So, Castellanos has a much better hit tool. So you're looking at Castellanos hitting somewhere between 280 and 300, and Schwarber somewhere, I think, between 240 and 260. But it'll be fun. That offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And our share of Aaron Nola in TGFBI just took a bit of a hit with that defense. Next signing, looks like we got 3 more to go over, is Ryan McMahon. We covered it a little bit. He signed a 6-year extension with the Rockies, which is quite the contract for an average player. But I expect him to settle in at a corner, probably third base. Very little competition over there at third, if they consider Chris Bryant a left fielder. And fantasy-wise, McMahon's value was in his versatility, because he was basically eligible all over the dirt. And if he settles in at a spot, which is what I expect after he signs this contract, he eventually loses that eligibility and just becomes, in my opinion, just another third baseman, basically, or oatmeal, as some of the others would say. We got to come up with our own term for that. Any thoughts on McMahon, or you move on to the next?
Let's move on.
He's that boring for you, huh?
Yep.
Carter Kieboom, 60-day DL. third baseman, Washington Nationals, expected to get 500 at bats with the Nationals this year. Maikel Franco is his replacement. Definitely not a player you want to roster on your fantasy team unless he goes on a bender and just starts hitting home runs, which he's done a couple of times in his career, but he's a stay away for me, especially with the amount of lack of discipline that he has at the plate. The only other thought I have with Kieboom going on the DL is we might see a little more Luis Garcia or even Cesar Hernandez move around the diamond a bit to accommodate, but Hernandez is the only one I might have a little bit of interest in. There were some rumors about him hitting leadoff in that lineup. And, you know, he did have really great on-base skill when he was with Cleveland. So he might be a little bit of interest and a little bit under the radar as a on-base run scoring option. But again, not to spend too much time on Carter Kieboom. What it does do is if there are any third basemen that are competing for spots, and it opens up a trade scenario for the Nationals. So I would keep an eye on that. Any thoughts on your former favorite team and their third base situation?
No, they've discontinued to sign those boring veteran players. So I'm not really interested.
The team is dead.
Are we not going to talk about Correa and Story? We're like burying the lead, man.
We're limping there. So
we gotta move on.
I like the Carter Kieboom stuff, man. Let's go. All right. So Carlos Correa signs a 3-year deal with an opt-out after years 1 and 2. They pay him $35.1 million per year. The 0.1 was because it put him as the highest AAV for a middle infielder of all time. That's why he wanted the 0.1. $35 million per year was signed by whom? I think it was a recent shortstop contract. I'll have to figure that out. Anyways, the 0.1 was so that he had that top AAV. Impact on that team. How shocked were you that he signed with the Twins?
It happened really late. I was really shocked, and I was just really excited because it was I was glad that they used their resources. You know, they had moved some salaries around, and they kept saying that they weren't done, and so it was just cool to see them go out and try to get better. And he's obviously, I mean, he was like a 7-WAR player last year. So yeah, just up the middle defense and the middle of the bat presence. And I mean, not everything that he does shows up on the fantasy sheet, but for that team, it was just really cool. I want to see the Twins do well. I want to see Buxton succeed, and I like Rise, and I like that they're trying to improve their pitching staff. I like Ober, and then they brought in Sonny Gray, and they got some interesting pitchers in the minor. I don't know. And then Miranda is one of Matt's favorites. So I'm just interested in that team, and I was just excited to see them add a piece like that, a smaller market, and
bro, how can you forget Joe Ryan? Where's the Joe Ryan love? Are you not about the one pitch pitcher or what?
Ask me in 2 months if anyone still cares about him. But anyway, yeah, I was just excited. They're a fun team, and it certainly seems like it works for both sides, because he has the option to go back out and try to get the longer term deal he wants, but he also, like you said, gets that ego boost of being the highest paid, you know, a middle infielder that his agent and he wanted. So it was, you know, I think we talked about last time he may have to go for a shorter term to get the dollars that he wants, because we just had a hard time figuring out a team that could give him the length, you know, based on the resources. So that's kind of what happened. But yeah, I'm just excited to see him in Minnesota, and for both sides.
Who does he impact fantasy wise on that team?
I think to me, he props up all the guys in that lineup, the top of that lineup. You know, I don't really know. I haven't looked at other than Buxton. I know Buxton's leading off every day. And I know that they're continuing to play Snow over Kirilloff, which frustrates me. But beyond that,
Snow over Kirilloff frustrates you?
Yes.
I have an irrational
So
love for Miguel Sano. I'm sorry,
I
and I
yeah,
do
you
not I do not like Kirilloff or
I
Kepler
know
or Larnick or any of those guys. They're not my favorites. So I like that they keep giving Sano opportunity. I think he'll be 35 and I'll still be thinking he can hit 45 home runs at some point in time. That's just
that's what
uh,
Matt said to me today. I was like, he said something about Josh Lowe's strikeouts, and in the next sentence he's talking about how much he likes Miguel Sano. Like, you can't say you hate strikeouts and then say you want Miguel Sano. He said, well, Lowe doesn't come with 45 home runs.
neither does Sano. That's what I would have said.
Yeah.
So their lineup currently on roster resource has Buxton leading off, Luis Ariz hitting second, Carlos Correa hitting third, Jorge Polanco cleanup, and then Sano, Kepler, Gary Sanchez, Kirilloff in the 8 hole, and Gio Urshela in the 9.
Hmm.
I think so. I do think it impacts Miranda quite a bit, which is unfortunate because I think Jose Miranda is a good hitter, and I wanted to see what he was capable of. I know Matt was pretty disappointed in that. And then it does impact Royce Lewis as well. So if you had shares of Royce Lewis or he was a shortstop you were interested in, former #1 pick of the Twins, gone through some injury, but still very talented. I think Correa doesn't. They didn't sign Correa because they don't believe in Lewis. I think they signed Correa. They signed Correa because they had the opportunity to sign him.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. One thing that I noted is that he doesn't have big on base percentage guys in front of him, right? Buxton is not an OBP guy as much as he's just explosive. And Ariz doesn't take many walks. He's a high average hitter. So I think his RBI opportunities might go down a little bit, moving from Houston to Minnesota. And then he hit 26 home runs last year. And if all of his hits were at target field, he would have had 22. So there might be, I didn't look at how many of his home runs were in the Crawford boxes in Houston, but there might be a slight dip in homers if he performs the way that he did last year. So statistically, he takes a tiny bit of a hit, in my opinion, moving from Houston to Minnesota. But as a baseball fan, as you said, it is very exciting for Minnesota to get a player of that caliber. I'm really happy for them. We'll see what happens. Trevor Story signs with the Boston Red Sox, 6-year deal, I believe. It's penciled in to play second base now. It's going to be their second baseman. What do you see from Story, and did that signing excite you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would be excited to roster him. I think for the first time in his career, batting up at the top of that, I think he's slotted in about second, in front of Bogarts and Devers and Martinez. And yeah, and I think it was pretty cool to hear that Xander called him to really try to get him to sway him to consider Boston, which is kind of cool. I think it says a lot about Xander, and he just wants to win, and he's not intimidated or worried about bringing someone who plays the same position as him. It's kind of cool. But anyway, yeah, with them up the middle, I think it gives their top of their lineup more legitimacy. And they're trying to remember the name of the second baseman that they have, who's kind of a middling player. I can't think of it. They were playing Chavis there a little bit last year. They have someone at the end of their bench. I just can't think of his name right now.
Kike?
But
Or no?
not Kike. No, he was in the outfield mostly. But yeah, now Kike can go to the outfield, which shores up the depth out there. But yeah, I just think yeah, with the Green Monster and right when in left field, I would be excited to get Story. I really would, and I think it's going to be good for the guys who hit behind him. I'm
Roster
interested to see what they do
resource.
with leadoff.
So roster resource currently has him hitting 5th, which changes the calculus quite a bit with his statistics. So they have Kike hitting leadoff and center, Devers hitting second, Bogarts 3rd, JD 4th, Story 5th, and then Verdugo, Dalbec, Vasquez, and Bradley.
Yeah, that's not what I'd heard. I heard that they were going to keep 3, 4, 5 the same, but we'll see. What do you think Devers is? What do you think of Devers as a 2-hitter?
I just think Devers is going to be great wherever he hits. Honestly,
Sure,
I would
I get it. Yeah,
I would want, because Devers I think is head and shoulders the best hitter on that team. Hitting in
right.
the second is right where I would want him, because I would want him to get as many plate appearances as possible,
Sure, got
regardless
it.
of what's around him. They are a little right-handed heavy, which is kind of interesting. I know that they were hoping that Verdugo could move or could produce in a kind of higher in the order. Uh, the one on this list that's a little strange to me is Kike hitting as high as he does, but I guess they don't really have a traditional leadoff hitter, so it makes a bit of sense. I've never been a fan of Trevor Story. I understand why he's valued the way that he is. He had that year in 19 where he had 35 home runs and 111 runs, 85 RBIs, and 23 steals. And the previous year, he had 37 home runs and 27 steals. So he's obviously a huge asset at shortstop fantasy, and that now at second base. The question is, he's got a barky elbow, and people don't really know what to make of that. So the move to second may save him a bit as well. Where do you rank him among second basemen? If you were in a redraft, knowing that he's going to be second base eligible, where do you put him on that list?
Probably put him in like low tier 2, maybe high tier 3. I mean, when we did our shortstop preview, you were higher on him than I was. But I think getting out of Colorado, I would raise his stock a little bit. Like you, he's not a player I've ever been excited about.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of the opposite of Correa in that he's a better fantasy player than he is a real player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's not the kind of profile that usually appeals to me. And then being in Colorado, I just kind of ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, this would be the first time I'd be really kind of excited to get him, just because I think he's in a winning environment, and I think he'll play with just a different level of enthusiasm and engagement than he has the last couple of years. And Ingham will continue to put up good fantasy stats. But yeah, I don't think he's a great all around player by any means. Not the player that Correa is, certainly, but he just produces better fantasy stats because he runs and hits for power.
So amongst that group with, let's just say Altuve, Albies, Semien, Trey Turner, where is he on that list for you
that sounds like tier 1 to me.
this upcoming year? So you put him
Yeah,
below all of those guys? You put him with Brandon Lau and Muncy and Baez and
I
Marte?
put him like around Baez.
Huh. Okay.
That sounds more right to me than up there with like the other guys you said.
See, I'm moving him
I
up.
mean,
I'm moving him up. I might put him at 2. So
wow, okay,
if I put his potential stats next to Albies, there's not a whole lot of difference between Albies and Story with with home runs and steals, provided Story still runs in Boston.
sure,
And they both are pretty low average hitters, right? Albies last year was 259, 310, 799. Story's going to have a better OPS.
yeah.
The difference is Albies had 100 runs, 100 plus runs, 100 plus RBIs, but that may change for Story being in that Boston lineup, especially if
Right.
he hits in the 2, right? If he hits in the 2, he's looking at a shit ton of runs and RBIs. Hitting in the 5, they might not drive him in. He might score 75 to 85 runs instead of 100. But to me, moving him from being essentially stranded in that Colorado lineup to being in this Boston lineup gives him an enormous bump. And I don't like to get into the mentals of a player, but I do wonder if the upcoming contract played into Story's performance at all. Now that he's settled in with this big contract, does it impact him positively because he has that security? Does it impact him negatively because he's trying to live up to the contract? We'll see what happens. But I like his value much, much more now than I did, a week ago.
I agree.
The last player we have on the transaction list is Jorge Soler. He signed a 3-year deal with the Marlins. 3 years, 36, I believe. Do you have any sort of interest in Jorge Soler now that he's with the Marlins?
I think my interest is the same. I don't think with his power, any ballpark is necessarily going to be a huge factor for him.
Mhm.
He certainly is going to get the playing time. So um, I don't know that I'm necessarily more interested or less interested. I was mildly interested for him as a power source, maybe as a number 3 outfielder before, and I don't think this move changes the way I see him at all.
I can't get that home run in Houston out of my head that he hit in the playoffs. Was just that was such a bomb. And he's such
Yeah,
a, I remember him coming up with the Cubs, and he looks like he's just a freak. And he'll get, the cool thing about playing in Miami for him is I think he'll get, as long as he's healthy, he get 550, 600 plate appearances there. He's going to get
yeah,
as
I
many as
agree.
he can handle. And so we get to see just how good is Jorge Soler now that he's in Miami. One weird thing was, so he had 27 home runs last year, but according to Baseball Savant, if he was in Miami, he would have had 36. If all of his batted balls were in Miami. And I think of Miami as a much bigger park
Sure.
than most. And I didn't take the time to look at the spray chart to see where those balls were hit. But I'd found that fascinating that he would have hit 36 in Miami, but he only had 27 last year.
Yeah,
So
like I
that will
said, I
conclude
think with his
our,
power, I don't think the ballpark really matters.
right. That
I was
concludes
hoping
our,
he, I
sorry.
was hoping he'd, I was hoping he'd be let go back into the pool, and he was not. He was kept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was a trek. We made it through all the transactions that we saw as ones that we wanted to talk about, including Carter Kieboom going on the 60-day, Ryan McMahon's 6-year extension, Michael Pineda signing in Detroit, Jock Peterson signing with the Giants, and we let off with Andrew McCutchen.
I actually did like that one. The rest of those I could have done without.
I love it. I think it's super interesting. So we've got 2 more things to cover. We're going to talk real quickly about our top 10 pitching prospects for fantasy this season and for kind of dynasty and beyond. We'll start with this season's fantasy baseball starting pitcher prospects. Who are your top 5?
I have 10 pitchers here.
Uh-huh.
I will give you my first 5. I did not necessarily put them in order. I do have a favorite, and he is not listed here in the first 5. The 5 I have listed are Grayson Rodriguez, Shane Baz, George Kirby, Hunter Green, and Rosie Contreras. My rubric for this exercise was to find someone who we talked about who had a fastball that graded out at least 60 and had a future command of at least 50.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of our discussion around the challenge of finding pitching prospects and what is it that what skills can you, when number scouting, what do you look for to build upon, knowing that you can add a third pitch, the importance of a changeup, and then also trying to do some more video scouting. So the fastball and the command, thinking again of like George Kirby, kind of is like the model for that, or like a Hunter Green, the fact that he has that fastball that carries his arsenal. These were the 5 that I came up with to start. What about you?
So I did the exercise a little bit differently, but it's all the same. For me, it was who were my top 10 pitching prospects overall, and then who are my top 10 pitching prospects from a fantasy point of view for this upcoming, for 2022.
Okay.
Right. So to kind of build on what you were saying, my current top 5 pitching prospects are George Kirby at 1, Shane Baz at 2, Bobby Miller at 3, Grayson Rodriguez 4, Hunter Green 5. So my thought process is so similar to yours, right? You're looking for 2+ pitches, right? We know that you can build on 2+ pitches. You want one of them to be hard. You want one of them to be a fastball. But the more I dug and the more I think about pitching and kind of adjust my own philosophy, the more I realize that command is most often the the big separator, right? Command is the thing that comes last. Command is the thing that's most almost most treasured, because it's what separates DeGrom and Scherzer and those guys from the rest. There are a lot of really great arms in baseball. There aren't a lot of really great arms that can put the ball where they want it. And so Kirby was we talked about pinpoint control guy in college who had a low 90s fastball and grew into a high 90s fastball. And his stuff just got better and better. And so because his command is that great, that's why I have him at 1. He's got the same stuff as Boz and the other guys, but I trust his command. And so I think he has a higher floor with the same ceiling as the others. Boz, I think we've talked about, and other podcasts have talked about at length. I trust Tampa Bay. I don't like the fact that he's hurt right now. He's out for a few weeks. I guess the surprise on this list is Miller at 3 and Rodriguez at 4. I watched a bit of Rodriguez, a bit of his film from last year, and he's really dominant. But I get nervous with Baltimore pitching. Baltimore's destroyed pitching for 20 years now. And is he going to be the anomaly? I know that they changed some of their approach within their organization in terms of their minor leagues and their teachings, but I'm not going to be the one to take the gamble on the first pitcher they produce to be great.
Yeah.
And then
he has 3 pitches that are great out of his potential 70.
Mm-hmm. And you watch him pitch and you see it, right? Like I watched a couple of cut up videos of Grayson Rodriguez, and you see it. It's there. I don't love his delivery. I know that they say that his delivery is pretty smooth. I think there's some it looked like a little bit of crossfire when I was watching. I'm not a scout, so I don't know, but it wasn't comfortable for me in the same way that Kirby's is comfortable. And then we can talk a little bit about Bobby Miller. I know you love the Dodgers, at least their approach, and everything coming out about Miller right now is that he's got the same type of skill set as Walker Buehler. And that's a hell of a place to start. So Miller over Rodriguez is less about the pitcher and more about the organization and trusting the organization. And then Green.
What is his future command scheduled to be? Do you know, for Miller?
I don't.
Okay.
I want to say it's slightly above average, but not plus.
Okay.
But that's something that I think will come along with time too, for him. And again, I trust the Dodgers to be able to teach that. And Hunter Green I was really sad to let him go back into the pool. He was my 15th keeper. And as you probably have figured out, the minute Tommy Pham signed, which was literally 90 minutes before our keepers were due, I was at work and I texted Matt and I said, please change my keeper from Hunter Green to Tommy Pham. I'm going to root for Hunter Green one way or another. He's just a really fun watch. And, he's a pitcher that can sit triple digits and then get it up to 104, which is just wild to think about. I worry about him pitching in Cincinnati, and I worry about his lack of a third pitch, but his potential is too high to not have him at 5. Who are your second 5?
Yeah, so my next 5, I have 3 Marlins. So apparently they have a type that met my criteria and that I was interested in. Edward Cabrera I'm going to start at 10 and work towards 6. So Edward Cabrera is 10. Kay Cavalli was 9. He has 2 pitches that are potentially graded out as 70. Yuri Perez for the Marlins.
Mm-hmm.
And then Max Meyer for the Marlins, who's honestly, to me, the one that I'm the most interested in fantasy-wise right now. And then Daniel Espino from Cleveland is the one that number 6 for me, and is the one that I looked at film work on, and I was most excited to talk about. It's my favorite of this group. I feel like, we've talked a lot about Kirby and Green, great Rodriguez and Baz get so much publicity, and you and I both also have talked about Ronzi and liking him. So I wanted to dig into someone who I didn't know as well. So Spino was in a high A this year. He's age 21, so he's literally a year behind Grayson Rodriguez, who was 22 at AA last year. So age to level, he was very comparable. His fastball is rated 65. And his slider is potential 60, changeup potential 55, and curveball potential 55. And his command is on par with everyone except for Kirby, future potential 50. His velocity, let me pull it up here. I had it. He sits mid 90s, 94 to 97, but he has hit 99.
Mhm.
And when I watched him pitch, he pitches out of the stretch all the time. And I don't like this comp because it's not a person I would like to talk about, but it reminds me of Trevor Bauer, in that the way Trevor Bauer gets behind the baseball when he pitches, it's hard. That's the way I'm describing it, but it's like his lower half. He's really it kind of looks like a weightlifter, like his lower half. He's like really kind of like a fullback, and he really gets behind the ball, and you can see like how much power he gets from his lower half, and he really gets behind, and it's just his arm just comes through just like really smoothly. There's no like whip action or anything. And I read that some people think he has a cross arm, like cross body delivery. I didn't see that at all. It just seemed like he was right down on the plate. And then again, pitching from the stretch, I like that from a durability standpoint and also a repeatability standpoint. And the fact that he's sitting in the mid 90s and he can touch high 90s and he's 21, he looked very smooth on the mound. So I really liked what I saw. He posted a 40.5% K rate at high A this year. His walk rate was 10%. But again, as you highlighted earlier on, like that's the last thing to come along. He's anticipated he's going to continue to improve that. Yeah, like he didn't have that 70 grade pitch, but I think if the fastball is just a tick away, and then he has 4 pitches, where a lot of these guys have, like Rodriguez has 3, a lot of them just have 1, or Max Meyer has his fastball and his slider, and Cavalli has his fastball and his curveball. Or changeup, pardon me, fastball, changeup. But yeah, the fact that he has 4 potentials, particularly that are potentially plus with 40% K rate and high, I just liked what I saw from the video as well. So, and that was honestly really fun for me I liked your challenge of like really looking at guys as well. And I want to continue to do that as I start to consider putting guys on my roster, make that part of my process. So he was a fun find for me.
Are you picking Espino then in the draft?
I don't think so.
No. I bet you he goes.
It doesn't align with my strategy, what I want to do.
What's that, rebuild?
Yeah, that's it. Selling it off.
Right.
Updating my trade block. Hold on to your seat.
Exactly. So my bottom 5, I'll follow your lead and start at the bottom. 10 was, and I'm probably going to catch a lot of shit for this, but 10 is Mackenzie Gore. 9 is Espino. As you know, I'm in lockstep with you as far as Espino, and the Indians know pitching, and so I think I trust them to do good things with Espino's arm. 8 is Yuri Perez. I think he's really interesting. He's 19. As you said, Marlins prospect. I think he's 6'8" or 6'9". He's really tall, and is really kind of growing into his fastball and delivery this year. Max Meyer, former number 3 pick, as you said, fastball, slider. They really don't know if he's going to develop a third pitch. I know the Marlins teach the changeup, and they believe in teaching that changeup, and so their assumption was they would be able to teach Meyer that third pitch. He hasn't needed it yet. He had 4 innings and no walks, no hits, and 5 Ks in his first spring outing this year. I think we're going to see him move up the board quite a bit. And then I had Jack Leiter at 6. A lot of that is pedigree. We don't really know what to make of him yet, but Vanderbilt star, son of a major leaguer. He's a little on the short end. He's 6'1", and he's had a bit of mileage on his arm because he pitched for Vanderbilt, but there was a reason why he was the number 2 pick. So he's my number 6. I don't have anything to add as far as Espino or Perez or Meyer. I think Gore is the interesting one for me because this time, he'll lose his prospect status if this happens. But the way he looked when I watched him in that first outing in the spring, he was back up to, high 90s. And he's throwing 97, 98, 99, which was the old Mackenzie Gore. He got rid of his high leg kick, and he looked dominant, right? At minimum, he looked like a dominant reliever. And I know that there's been some talk that he could go close right away for the Padres, given their lack of closer. But I like him both from a fantasy standpoint and the fact that we can get Mackenzie Gore at a discount right now from in fantasy. Did you have any other pitchers that didn't make this list that were of interest to you at all?
Yeah, for 2022, I wanted to find somebody who might like pop, or you could maybe find and maybe help you. Caleb Killian was part of the Chris Bryant trade from the Cubs from the Giants, so he's with the Cubs now. I just closed my board because I thought we were wrapping up. Let me pull it back up.
Never wrapping up.
No, dude, I have to go to sleep, man. Ah, dang it, that's my batters. Where do my pitchers go? There it is. So yeah, so Killian, that's still not it. Daggone it. I'm just gonna have to go from memory. So, like Kirby, he has elite command. When I watched video of him, I did not like his delivery. I did not find it as clean as I did the Cleveland pitcher we just talked about. He is more traditional windup, but he's a command first pitcher, or has been. But he has added some velocity, sitting at like 93, 94, and could touch 96. And really started to develop his other pitches this year, and seemed like Chicago got a little bit more than maybe they were bargaining for when they got him. And he really finished the year strong. And he has 4 at least average pitches, and 2 could be plus, or that's the way it was graded going into this year. And then he finished the fall league. He was one of the best pitchers there, and by usually most of the hitters are ahead of the pitchers at the fall league, and he was one of the few pitchers that really excelled. So someone who has that command on an organization that potentially has a need for pitching, I thought he might be able to be someone you might see come up if he continue to build on what he did at the end of the year and continue to develop his other pitches. He might be someone of interest, because to me that's like we talked about. If someone can at least come up and have command and not walk the yard when in their first go around, is someone maybe to have something to build on. So I don't think he has any ceiling long term to be like a 1 or 2, but he might be someone that comes up this year and you could rely on for some starts, who I would be interested in seeing at the next level.
I have a quick list of starters that were not on that top 10, but I think have a good amount of value in 2022. That you want to have on your list. We all know Reed Detmers has a spot in the rotation with the Angels. We talked about him a bit, I think, last pod. Roansy Contreras was traded from the Yankees is on the Pirates and is competing for the 4th or 5th spot in the rotation. Keep an eye on him. He's got really good stuff. He's a fun watch. Surprised you didn't talk about Ashby in this at all, or is he you kept him, right?
Yes.
We can talk about the keep later. I like that. I know Matt said he did too. Ashby's a really interesting one. It's just going to be more about role. The skills are there. You talked a little bit about, or you gave your opinion on Joe Ryan, so we won't go there, but he also has a spot in the Minnesota rotation and will have an opportunity to show out this year. Then the other 2 that I have on this list, Matt Liberatore, who was a first-round pick of the Cardinals a few years back, left-handed starter. Doesn't have great stuff, but he's got 4 pitches. He is competing for that 5th spot, and with Flaherty going down, I think there's a decent opportunity for him to secure one of those spots. He's kind of the same pitcher he was when he was drafted. He hasn't gotten any better, but I think he's one of those guys that could maybe fit into the back of your fantasy rotation. He also, St. Louis, again, context, has a great defense and a huge park and a not so great division. And so you could see him perform a little bit above his skills because of those contextual factors. And then the last one is Matt Brash, who is a starting pitching prospect for the Mariners. He was traded from the Padres to the Mariners for one of the Williams relievers. I forgot his first name, but it was kind of an afterthought when Brash arrived with the Mariners. He now has a Mickey Mouse slider, or Bugs Bunny slider, I guess is the term. I called it Mickey Mouse, and a great fastball. And so his profile screams bulk inning reliever, incredibly valuable bulk inning reliever in 2022. You could see Brash have a 11 to 12, strikeout per nine sort of line, and maybe even pick up 8 to 10 wins in that middle relief role. I could see them losing another right-handed reliever in the pen and him becoming a dominant setup guy immediately and be able to pick up holds in our league. He's one I'm targeting. I hope no one's listening at this point in the podcast, because Matt Brash is someone I would consider as high as kind of round 6 or 7. I think he's got that kind of stuff. I think that's it on my list. I think we're good. Do you have anything else to add? We can table open forum until Sunday, if you like, or Saturday, depending on when we do it.
That sounds good. Let's do that.
And just real quickly, what's your initial reaction to the keepers when you saw the list?
Well, I don't know that I have one, Tino. I mean, I'm a selfish son of a bitch. So I honestly
trying to give up any sort of
no, I mean, it's all about me and my experience. Like I was just relieved that it was finally over. I think I show it differently than you do. Like you're much more expressive about your love for your players. I think I'm more reserved. Like I didn't talk about Ashby. I that's right or wrong. That's my nature. I just don't like, I'm not comfortable. But like there were players that I cut who I really loved. There were players that I traded that I really loved to meet this deadline. So for me, it was just a sense of relief that the decisions are made. I believe in my process, but it was kind of an emotional thing because I had to make some really hard decisions. And I just felt relief that it was over, that again, the decisions were made, the pool is now set. From a non-selfish perspective, I just continue to just be taken aback by the variety of approaches that exist in this league. We got teams that kept 9 pitchers, and we got teams that kept 1 pitcher. We have teams that have kept prospects for 4 years. We have teams that kept no prospects. We have teams that kept 2 catchers. Most of the league kept no catchers. And so it's just the variety and just complete chaos of the different approaches is just really interesting to me. I don't know if I can assimilate it into a takeaway, but I can tell you I think it's interesting.
Were there any shockers for you as far as players that were cut?
I was surprised there weren't more relievers kept. There are many teams that have no relievers. And I know that saves are volatile, but we're also in a holds league. So guys like Devin Williams being cut, or Jonathan Loastiga, or even like a Jake McGee, who again, I know you prefer Duvall, which is fine. But to me, again, and we've talked about this on the pod, going into the draft with a 0, it's in your bullpen, either in holds or saves. It's hard for me to think about how I would attack that. So I was surprised by some of those cuts. I'm always surprised at how few minor leaguers are kept. I can pull this up for you. So that was a surprise for me. I have the numbers real quick. So we had in total for a 16-team league, we had 37 minor league players kept. And if you subtract Matt, and you subtract Matt's team, we're down to 24 for 15 teams. So outside of Matt, who kept 13 minor league players, we had 24,
1.6, 1.7 per team.
Exactly. So, and then So in our dynasty, our hybrid dynasty, it always surprises me how little I think of myself as a very conservative, and like I kept two. So I guess I'm slightly above average, but yeah. So I'm trying to think if there were any other major takeaways. I mean, I think the starting pitching pool is pretty robust. I think there's some decent starters, but that's kind of how it always is. And then I think there were some hitters kept that I would question if they're worth being kept or not.
We need names here, man.
Okay, let me.
So I just pulled up second base, and LeMahieu was kept. Torres was kept. Brendan Rodgers was kept. Brendan Rodgers is scary. Kevin Biggio was kept. I think Biggio was one that really stood out for me. I was pretty surprised by
Yeah.
that.
Baum was kept, and I
Mhm.
know somebody talked about in the pod that Brandon might do that. That was kind of surprising to me.
I will never kick dirt on BY's name. BY is one who will just he'll do that in basketball too, where he'll keep guys and you're just like, what are you doing, B? Like, and then that guy ends up being a superstar the next year. I will never kick dirt on BY's name ever.
Yeah.
You keep who you want, and I'm gonna follow those dudes.
Yeah. It was interesting. It was interesting to me that Doug waived Miles Straw because I know he was trying really hard to sell him.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like he didn't want to keep him.
There's too much value. Gio
Yeah.
Urshela was kept. There's
Yep.
another one.
Adolis Garcia, Michael Quinforto. Quinforto doesn't have a team. Like we talked about Garcia and my skepticism about what he did last year. Craig Kimbrell is kept, even though he doesn't have a team. I guess you can make an argument for there's potential there.
Royce Lewis.
Yeah, that's an interesting team to me. That same team also kept Nick Senzel.
I was hoping Senzel was going to end up in the pool. Honestly, I think Senzel is he has the pedigree. He's got good power. He's got good speed. His metrics are pretty good. He's one that I was hoping was going to end up back in the pool. I don't see any others off the top that are screaming at me as egregious keeps. Austin Hayes is a bit egregious. I don't know. Ahmed Rosario, Eddie Rosario, like you said, Adolis Garcia. Like I see Garcia's 29 home runs and 14 steals, but 690 OPS is going to destroy you. It's just interesting. It's like you said, everyone has different approaches. I think that some of it is fantasy malpractice and some of it is just a difference in approach, right? We can pick apart one another's team. It's always a fun process. And I do want to see Loaded Bowler's list of keeper predictions, because I'm sure that's pretty fascinating. That's an exercise I think I'll probably do myself next year. That seems pretty cool. All in all, it's this draft is, I think for me, so just to conclude kind of and piggyback on what you were saying about being glad that the keeper process was over. I feel that way. I don't feel that way about the keeper process. Like you, I trust the process in my own process, but I love those transactions. I love the banter. I love the debate. And for me, it's something that I embrace and I'm excited for. And I was actually a little sad that was over, that I couldn't continue to churn my roster and I couldn't continue to have these conversations. And I was now hamstrung a bit by only having 15 guys to deal. However, I do, there is a bit of the right word too is anxiety. There's a bit of anxiety for me leading up to my pick. And so because I don't pick until round 5, I'm really anxious to see who comes off the board. And so what my exercise will be is I think it's right around pick or ADP 310 is where I'll start picking. And so I'm going to take from probably 280 or so and start there and not even really look at players that have an ADP of less than 280 and then try to schedule out what positions I want to pick where and who I think is going to be available in those positions to get a good feel of what my team might look like. But super excited. Again, a bit surprised by some of the keepers. Stroman really stands out to me as someone who should have been kept. I was really surprised by that. Obviously, Verlander's available this year, which is going to be, I assume he's going to go probably top 5.
I would think so.
And then there were a couple of other starting pitchers. Lance Lynn, I think should go first round. There were a few more here. And then we'll be done. I cut Flaherty. So Flaherty's current ADP is 160. We just don't know what's going to happen to him. One quick question for you. What do you think the percentage of managers in our league is that would pick up or pick Trevor Bauer?
70?
70% would?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your guess?
50, 40. I think it's at half or less than half. I was surprised Tristan McKenzie wasn't kept. That was an interesting one. I don't know. There's a lot of guys. It's going to be fun. I think you, me, and Brandon will be battling over Huascar Inoa. It'll be a race to see who's willing to pick him highest. But I'm pumped. I'm ready. So you got this draft. We'll have our Roto 15 keeper Roto League auction coming up at some point. And I got roped into an AL Root score sheet league. Have you played score sheet before?
No.
So score sheet is essentially you make out a lineup and it's a simulation based on the previous week's statistics for each player.
Yeah.
Pretty deep, a lot of fun. You can cover it on another podcast if you like, but I just wanted to add that I got roped into a crazy score sheet league again. You got anything else?
No, and I would echo what you said about the process of going up to the keeper cutoff. I just think, I just worked really hard as I know you did, and I'm just ready for like a different chapter. Yeah, just excruciating over these decisions, and like I went from having basically no draft picks in the top 100 to having 6, and just like and again, I value every interaction, and I tried to express that to our league mates as well. Because you gotta get 5 no's for every 1 yes. And just like grinding it out and like trying to get value for your players. You're not going to keep trying to make it work for both sides. And so to be able to come out of that process and have 6 picks in the top 100 and feel like I put myself in a position for the draft, it was just a lot of damn work. So I'm ready to try to hopefully make some fruit off of that work and get started. So
you
yeah,
try to make it work for both sides. That's what I hear.
I try very hard. Yes.
We differ there.
I know. That is my approach. I don't try to win the trade. I think both sides should win.
I appreciate that.
But,
I appreciate that. We need both in the league, both approaches. Me and Aaron Horn will stand on this side, and we'll let everybody else be on the other side. And with that,
oh, good grief, man!
It was good talking with you, man. We'll catch up Sunday.
Okay.
Appreciate
it. Good, happy preparation. I will talk to you soon.
I will. I'm gonna have spring training games on and doing it.
Okay, bye.
Talk to you soon, brother.